Today I'd like to talk about a photographic project that I produced between 2004 and 2007 called The Edge of Town. I will work through how I developed the look and feel of the images, also how the visual language must mirror the intended message behind the essay, and the challenges that I faced achieving this. At that time, apartheid had been over for over a decade, and South Africans were becoming frustrated with the lack of change within the country. There was, however, still a little optimism that Mandela's dream for the country could be realized. It was before the corruption had completely taken over all levels of government, as we find now in 2022. I wanted to primarily focus on South African outsiders, those people who had been forced by economic circumstances to inhabit the spaces on the edges of communities. Right from the beginning as a photographer and all the way through apartheid, I had mainly photographed in black and white for my personal work. And it was predominantly photojournalistic or documentary work that I'd done. When I was starting to put ideas together for this project, I initially thought that I would continue in black and white, and I actually started photographing. But what I found was that my images lacked a vitality and a sense of immediacy, so I switched over to color, and immediately they gained a vitality as well as a more in-your-face type of energy. I think there were a number of other factors that pushed me towards color. In my painting work, I was moving in the direction of abstraction, and I'd also been blown away by a film that was released at the time by Chinese director Wong Kar-wai, called In the Mood for Love, and it explores in a very non-linear manner the complex workings of memory and how we look and remember. It's a kind of dream-like approach to filmmaking. All his films have a real strong visual beauty, and he uses intense saturated colors and very offbeat framing. So his work favors perception far more than representation. And this particular film made a real impact on my way of thinking at the time. I was very keen for this body of work to not blend into my previous essays. I felt the need to break away from photographic conventions that governed the way I was looking and photographing before. So I wanted to blur the line between the kind of metaphorical or symbolic representation and what had been my comfort zone of more traditional documentary or photojournalism. The challenge became how I was going to mold a visual language that would suit the subject matter, and the images could emerge as fragments that could build up a broader picture of the lives of people on the literal and figurative edges of town. The more I photographed, the more I realized that I had to place myself really close to my subjects in order to communicate something that was more intimate and immediate. This was a challenge for me because I lean towards being an introvert, so my knee-jerk reaction is to hold back and not really intrude into other people's personal space. I also wanted to break the Cartier-Bresson convention of having a central focus or decisive moment. Rather, I was looking to include several areas of focus within the frame. The elements needed to be non-linear, and the composition should be as unpredictable as I could make it. So the result that I was looking for would be fragmented and layered, so it would mirror the process of change within society, which is never smooth. It's always got a kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back feel. The images that I noticed started to really work were the ones that I'd taken in the morning and evening, where there was really high contrast, producing deep shadows and strongly saturated highlights. And they had an unsettled feeling that I felt was important. Something that I hadn't foreseen was that one has a very short window of opportunity to photograph when you're getting in really close to subjects, because very quickly the photographer's presence starts to show through in the photographs. The photographer can also then become the central focus, or people start to act out for the camera, and the images look forced and inauthentic. I wanted the project to be representative of South Africa as a whole, so I tried to geographically cover as much of the country as possible. I landed up visiting well over 100 towns and townships countrywide. And I chose to avoid photographing in the same place twice. So that meant a lot of driving, stopping and interacting, and a whole lot of bed and breakfasts. So given all the self-imposed constraints for this project, as well as the challenges that I found along the way, my hit rate for successful images was particularly low in this project. Essentially, for the images to have a chance of making it into this project, they had to have multiple points of focus, impactful light with deep shadows, and the whole image had to have an unsettling undertone. As the visual language was taking form, I was primarily drawn to the work of two photographers. Ken Heyman worked with an autofocus point-and-shoot camera, really up close and mainly one-handed. His images had a really raw and violent quality to them, and I wanted to bring that aspect into the project. The other photographer was Alex Webb, who produced very poetic images with vibrant colors, and he mainly worked within the American tropics. But unlike the areas that he worked in, the edges of South Africa's townships were generally desolate, bleak, and lacking in color. Images from the completed essay were included in an exhibition called Figures and Fiction, shown at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, and also exhibitions of contemporary South African photography in Australia and Mali. I had two solo exhibitions in New York and Johannesburg. The essay was published by Graphis in 2011. I hope this video has provided some insight into how one conceptualizes and actualizes a long-term photographic project. Please feel free to comment below, and it'll be really helpful if you like and subscribe. Thanks. See you next time.
Is it over yet?
This is good. It really is.
What are they?
Well,
and find out what the future holds in store.
Is it over yet?